in the results from my DNA test. So what do genealogists look for, and are all tests the same? Bennett Greenspan is with Houston-based company Family Tree DNA. Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I got to brag on you for a minute because you're the one who started this whole thing.
I was in the right place at the right time and was interested in genealogy, and yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, so and you're interested in genealogy, but you moved forward with the system that we kind of have today?
Well, I ran into a paper trail roadblock that I couldn't get beyond, and because I like to read the newspaper, I remember that there had been a study done a few years earlier on the Jefferson family where they had used DNA to make a genealogical theory proven into fact.
Yeah, and you're talking about Thomas Jefferson, right? Yeah, because it's been rumored for a long time that there was the black family side and then the white family side, and so there are people who are trying to trace it all back to that DNA because, as we know, there are people who crossed and had children all over the place, right? Sure. But okay, so you were interested in that, and you thought, okay, let's use that DNA to help us in that family tree.
That's right.
Search.
Let's use that DNA where the paper trail runs cold. Let's use DNA as another piece of evidence that there's a relationship. And now people are doing that all over the world. It's become extremely popular in the United States. Probably 15 or 20 million people in the world have taken DNA tests.
It's the new hobby.
To prove that they're related to someone.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if Gladys Knight and I are related because my mom's maiden name is Knight, right? Okay, so, but, and the Pips, Gladys Knight and the Pips, right? All right, what are you looking at exactly when we send in either a swab or blood or whatever?
So we're looking at really hundreds of thousands of discrete data points, and we chain those together, build blocks, and then compare those large blocks of DNA to everyone in our database, and the people that have the most DNA in common with you are likely related to you most recently.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that on your DNA. We had a little fun with that.
Okay, let's take a look at our first chart here.
So
okay.
we think that we have found probably a third cousin of yours.
Okay.
We've masked the name so that that person's name remains anonymous, but we can show that to you on your personal page, and we have an example of your personal page here up on the screen.
There's a lot of relatives. Any of them have money?
Well, I'm going to leave that one to you. But the first person is likely, as I said, a third cousin. They've got a fair amount of DNA. They've got a very long block of DNA in common with you.
Yeah.
And we did a little more work to have a little fun, and we found that this is on the second slide. We found that there are 6 people in the database, or 5 people in the database, excuse me, who have a large block of DNA in common with you, and they all share that same block. So that means that all of these people shown here are related to you through a common set of great-grandparents. Now, it's for you genealogically to figure out which of your sets of great-great-grandparents they descend from, but the fact that you and they all share this block of DNA makes it very clear that you and they have common
not by
ancestry.
accident. Yeah.
Now, we've done a little bit more research on those guys, and we have determined that their ancestor is from Western Kentucky or Eastern Tennessee.
Okay.
So if you know that you have any family from that area, that would give you a hint as to how you're related to this half a dozen people.
And of course, everybody has a different story of kind of how they got here. For a lot of African Americans, we know the slave trade came in through, Virginia, through Georgia, Mississippi, and the South too. So and this is where you oftentimes too get the blending of families, where you have, the white race, black race that mixed, and so you'll find all types of things that are very interesting, which really tells us that a lot of us are much more of a melting pot in ourselves than we might even realize.
Actually, all of us are more melting pots than we realize. There is no such thing as pure French or pure German or pure English.
Yeah.
African Americans are on average about 3/4 Western African and about 1/4 European. And I have your percentage test here.
Oh, there it is right there.
And there it is. So on this, and this is particularly interesting, you're very typical of an African American with about 3/4 of your DNA being West African.
Okay.
You have about 1/4 of your DNA, which is European, spread out between Northwestern Europe, which would be the British Isles, Western and Central Central Europe, and a little bit of Scandinavia.
So France, Germany, Scandinavian, that explains why I have to spray tan my legs. It really, I'm saying, we were talking about this yesterday, Christina and I, I'm like going, look how light my legs are if I don't spray tan them. I know it sounds weird, but yeah, okay. But it's really interesting to see all that.
And then you have a little bit more DNA, very small amounts, what we call trace amounts, that are clearly associated with other groups, but they're so little that they represent less than 1% of your DNA. And interestingly, you have a small amount of your DNA from northeastern Asia. That's an upstream population to the Native American population. And then you also have DNA in common with North and Central American Native Americans and South American Native Americans. So you have about 1.5% of your DNA is Native American, and I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm quite confident in that. And so if you have an oral tradition in your family of having Native American, so it's not just an oral tradition, it's a real piece of your history and of your ancestry.
All right, so if there's one sibling that shows up with like predominantly certain things and the other sibling does not, does that mean that there's something going on in the family necessarily, or is it just kind of how DNA shakes out?
It does not, and I'm glad you brought that up. In effect, we are the result, if I can use an example, of two decks of cards. A red deck and a blue deck. You shuffle it once, that becomes you. We shuffle it again, and that becomes your sister. But if you don't shuffle the cards identically, then you and your sister are going to get different traits or different
Which is
genes
why we look
that
different,
will be expressed.
you know, whatever. Yes.
That's right. And so each of you may favor one of your parents, but you may not look like each other. And so that's just fine. That's perfectly okay. There's nothing to be concerned about here. But
Good morning, Mom.
But this is something that we find absolutely all the time. And it does give people a lot of pause for question until they understand that it's the underlying biology and it has nothing to do with fidelity.
Yeah. And what about like somebody does a test with one company and somebody does a test with another company and you get like two different things back, or not just are different, like you might not find out certain things?
Right. Well, the good news is that if you test with any of the other DNA testing companies, you can transfer those results into the family tree DNA database at no charge. So you can have one central repository for your DNA and your cousin's DNA, no matter where they tested.
Yeah.
And so that's a fact. And that's a good thing. Secondly, all of the DNA testing companies use somewhat different underlying comparative databases. So if I have a database of Native Americans from South America and someone else doesn't, then the test provides an answer which says, we don't have South American. What's the nearest population to South American, which would be in Native Americans, Central American Native Americans. And so, in effect, we'll give you the closest correct answer that we can based on the underlying databases that we're all comparing you against.
Let me round out with this. I remember when I did it, I was like, okay, that's cool. And then when I look at this, it's how it impacts you. It really, I almost wanted to cry, right? And I don't know why. I've always had a good sense of who I thought I was. But when you see that, it's meaningful. Why is it something that you feel would be important for people just to do?
Because it's the story of you.
Yeah.
You know, everyone is unique. All 6 billion of us on the planet are unique. But now we can begin to learn about our history because our history book is written into our DNA, written into our cells. And so what I like to say is that a good DNA test can tell you things about yourself that you cannot determine solely by looking in a mirror or by talking to your parents.
And we look at like some of the racial tension in this country. If everyone would do a DNA test, and you realize that you are that person you say you hate,
right?
And when you find out that you're everybody, I think that can help break down the walls as well.
I absolutely agree, and we have seen evidence of that among our customers where we've gotten someone whose name has 2 first names, like Bill and Bob, from the South, who may have, surprisingly, an African male Y chromosome or mitochondria, and it's a shock. But my experience is that once people get over the shock, they're bigger and better because of it.
All right, amen on that. I'm looking in my mind, I'm like going, you are Or the baby's father. Oh, no, no, sorry. Maury Povich. All right. But this is so cool. So you are offering a special around the holidays.
We are offering a special until the 22nd of November. And we look forward to everyone coming by our website and taking a look.
Yeah. All right. And we'll have that on greatdayhouston.com. Thank you very much.